Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Thursday, April 16th, 2026. I'm your host, George Kerr, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. I know that you said you were a little behind, but I know this is also one of your favorite times of the year. So how you doing?
I'm doing great. Talked about last week how I felt behind. This week, I'm not going to say I caught up because that'd be ridiculous to say that I caught up in the pre-draft studies in less than a week, but I am back fully locked in, ready to go, getting ready for my mock draft next week. 1 week left on my way home today, I was thinking, do I go to Pittsburgh next week? I don't even really like Pittsburgh, but do I go out there just to be a part of the draft because I love this time of the year so much? And the cherry on top is the Pistons are going to be in the playoffs, number one seed in the East. You're going to face either the Sixers or the Magic. So not the Sixers, the Magic or the Hornets.
Yeah, there you go.
So.
Yeah. Sixers get that iconic Boston matchup. You can come with me to Pittsburgh this weekend, and we can check out a Flyers-Penguins game, another great rivalry for a PA team sneaking their way into the playoffs for the first time in a while.
I do not want to. I would rather waste my time listening to some guy announce picks that I could get 10 minutes earlier on the internet than go to a hockey game.
That is a hard hit on hockey. I guess we're not going to be doing our 30 seconds of hockey on here, but you snuck in for your basketball, so I'm proud of you.
Yeah, because we need a lot longer than 30 seconds to explain what an icing is, when they call it, why sometimes they don't. It's kind of like offsides in soccer and offsides in hockey. Like sometimes it doesn't make sense, sometimes it does. People in the comments are probably like, bro, just learn the sports and you'd understand. I'm 31 years old. I ain't ever going to learn.
It's all good. I don't really like basketball, but I go along with it.
How could you not like basketball?
It's like the sissiest sport out there that's not soccer.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to get irritated.
As always, you can follow us at the Couch GMs on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok to talk about football, which is our sport that is a go-to. Make sure you are checking us out live at 6:30 East. Coming up to the draft here, we're going to actually be having an episode Wednesday night next week at 6:30. But I'll be on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. You can join the conversation live and join in on the show with any questions or comments that you have. And with that draft being a week away, why don't we see what's happening? So I know this is typically our news segment, but the draft being the big news, I thought you and I could take a moment this week.
Whoa. You have buried the lead. You're going to skip over the biggest news over the last week?
Hit me.
The Los Angeles Rams. New logo, new jersey, all one color, no more gradient. George, he still doesn't know how to talk about it, how to feel.
No, because you actually caught me off guard by bringing it up, and what I could have done was showed our new rebrand.
He's trying to find it. I mean, it is comical a little bit on how much the video, fantastic that they released with the uniforms. Great work on their team there. That's what they did. They made the logo all one color, and then they got rid of the gradient on the jerseys. That's basically it. They didn't do like a callback to heritage like the Commanders put out, and those jerseys look clean, and that video was incredibly well done. I would highly recommend going to check that out. But some new jerseys dropping. I mean, it's almost as subtle as the Eagles adding the black lettering on their jerseys right here, but they didn't announce it with a video. So
I think you like how we streamlined our logo too, took out unnecessary color.
Yeah, you missed a little bit in the yellow laces on the hidden detail in the couch, but it's okay.
You weren't supposed to say it.
It's okay. Hey, this is a good reminder to check us out on YouTube if you want to see what we're even talking about.
Or follow us on social media. It's posted on there. So if you are listening in the car and want to check it out later, there you go. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
And then one more piece of news, then I'll let you get into your draft thing. Because I think this happened in the last week. But right around the last week time, and maybe it didn't. But one Mr. Dontavian Wicks got traded from my team to your team. So had to give him a shout out there.
Yeah.
And 1 second, so I don't upset all the listeners. Have to give a shout out to the Wicks jersey. Still make an appearance. I'm keeping it up for George. Again, check it out on YouTube.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for honoring me with that one. Could make some things interesting on draft night if we see, does that influence a different move? You and I can talk about those potential things happening when we get to wide receivers in our draft preview. But I figured what we'd do here. We're a fantasy podcast, first and foremost. So why don't we take a look at some names you could be watching for either in your dynasty drafts or maybe even sneaking into some redrafts for next year. And some fits on where some of these guys could go. Because, almost every year we have like those top running backs that are like, yeah, they're great. But a lot of times it's the lower drafted running back that goes to the perfect fit or the team that's going to give them work. That ends up being the person that's the best in fantasy short term and even potentially long term. So you and I could take a look at some names here and we can talk about some teams that would want to fill those positions and give those positions some work. So do you want to get kicked off with quarterbacks as one would do?
Yeah. And I think it is worth noting, since this is fantasy focused, next week will be a full draft. This week, we're not going to hit on a lot of the defenders, a lot of the offensive linemen, which is like the bread and butter of the first round Thursday night. So make sure you stay tuned. And this is more of a fantasy outlook episode.
Definitely. So we're looking at a lot of skill position players, no defense, no offensive line, like you said. And this draft class is pretty widely considered one of the weaker ones. So it's going to be interesting finding who's going to be the most relevant when it comes to us in fantasy. But there is one quarterback who seems like he stood above the rest and is almost essentially the lock number one overall pick. Cody, that is.
That's Fernando Mendoza, and he's locked. I'm pretty sure when the Raiders signed Kirk Cousins, he mentioned being there for Fernando. Fernando probably already has the playbook. Like 101 is so locked in. I know the draft has changed from 10 minutes to 8 minutes on Thursday night. They're still going to take 7 minutes and 59 seconds, but they really only need one to make this pick.
Yeah, they just have to wait to see if somebody wants to make a desperation trade and give them 5 first-round picks. Oh, wait, the Browns withdrew that rule change.
Can't do that. Now, you mentioned it not being the most, the it's not high regarded as a great class. I think that when you hear that, I think you should interpret that as there's not a ton of upper echelon players. There doesn't feel like to be the stars. There's some very good players. It's a draft of very good. What that means though is like once we get to like pick 20, some people will have players that might not get picked till round 3, going at 21. Like there's like everyone's very close, and it makes it very hard to predict. Maybe that's a little, you know, too much of a stretch there. Maybe it's more middle round 2, but that's just kind of how this draft goes. But we know at the top you're going to get Fernando, and he has been a solid option. Since he announced for the draft, since Indiana won the championship, you know what you're going to get with him. He's not the toolsy traits guy, which we tend to, love all about, but he is the solid. I don't think he's as good as Joe Burrow, but that's kind of the player that he would, resemble with, doesn't necessarily have the strongest arm, doesn't have the greatest mobility, but he's very accurate. He processes really well. He has a strong enough arm. He's mobile enough. And I mean, if the Raiders can get Joe Burrow and Fernando Mendoza, they're going to be extremely happy. I don't think they're going to get quite that, but I still think he is deserving of the number 1 pick.
So interesting that it's like not overwhelming tools he's the best player, but it's more like he's a very well-rounded player and obviously a proven winner after what he did in Indiana.
Correct.
I like that. It's a little bit off of the norm to a sense because especially when it comes to these quarterbacks but skill position players in general, it's like some people put so much focus on the combine and how they tested and their pro days, and sometimes it goes deeper than that too. So
yeah. I mean, I think he's better than a Mac Jones, but I see him more in that Mac Jones mindset. This isn't the Trey Lance. If we're going to go back a few years, where Trey Lance was drafted completely on tools and Anthony Richardson was drafted completely on tools. No, we have Fernando Mendoza. There is still room to grow, but for the most part, you know what you're getting. You're getting a guy that can come in. And honestly, I think the pairing with him and Kirk Cousins, not forcing him right away, unless he comes out and blows it out of the water, I think there's still a chance. But I think Kirk Cousins is going to get the original start. He's going to get some time to learn the NFL process. He's going to get to sit back, take it all in, and then, go on from there. And he's shown a guy that, he has been able to grow in systems in the past. And I think that'll happen in Las Vegas as well. So I like that one at number one. And then for the rest of the quarterbacks,
You probably don't have your mock for next week finalized, but I'm sure since you've looked at some things, you have an idea. Do you expect more than one quarterback to go in round one?
I go back and forth with that one.
I feel like it's been boom or bust in the past where it's like there's 4 in the top 10 or there's 1 and there's nothing else. So
yeah, so like I think this is either going to be the what I remember what year it was, but everyone thought Will Levis was going to go high. He ended up going to the top of the second round, and I could see that same approach for a Ty Simpson. I don't think it'll be as far as like Malik Willis. There was talks of him going 101 and then fell all the way to the third round. I think it was that was there's no Shadur Sanders extreme slide here. Ty Simpson is the number 2 quarterback in fantasy for me it's all about fit situation. I think there's some teams that could be interested. Like if you would have asked me before the Rams traded for Trent McDuffie and gave up their first round pick at the end of if Ty Simpson was there at pick 29, I believe is where they're at. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Could they have gotten the successor to Matt Stafford? I could have seen that. Now that the Chiefs own that pick because of the Trent McDuffie trade earlier this offseason, is there a team? The team that is interesting, I know they're a team to watch. I don't know how much this means for fantasy. I'm going to talk about this next week too, so I won't dwell on it too much, is the New York Jets. They have multiple first-round picks, but they also have a pick in the top of the second round. So, do they pull the trigger on a guy like Ty Simpson, who has been a high riser as of, later in this process compared to where we entered the season? I think at the end of the day, I'm still leaning that he will go in the first round. I think a team will trade back in or he will go at the end, but I'm thinking like picks 25 to 32 and would not be surprised if he ends up going 34 to the Arizona Cardinals in round 2.
Or the Cardinals move up to 32, give up an extra pick to get a 5th-year option. I think that's within the realm of possibility and something we've seen plenty of times before with a team early second-round pick making that move up. I think he's going to end up going in the end of the first round. 1, because he's been a riser. 2, because there's going to be quarterback needy teams out there that are going to go try to get somebody. And I think he's pretty clearly my number 2 on the board too. And after that, I mean, not that he's a, solidified, definite star. We don't know that, but there's a lot more question marks below that. So
yeah, honestly, if he goes in the first round, I don't know if it'll be as drastic as the year we had 5 quarterbacks go in the first round and then not have Spencer Rattler go to the 5th round. But if we have both go in the first and then no quarterbacks go on day 2, that would not surprise me at all. I mean, just looking at consensus mock or consensus boards right now, Ty Simpson is anywhere from the 30 to 36 range in big boards. So that goes to show he's not really the first round projection, but he's the quarterback. So does he get that bump?
Yeah, exactly. Because there's going to be the team that drafts him just because he's a quarterback. I got what you're saying. But if you were just looking at a positionless price, try to say that maybe he's more closer to 50, 60 on the board.
Yeah, I mean maybe a little.
Hard to do that, I know.
Yeah, that's tough because there is so much value in the quarterback position. Yeah. And I know we're going to talk teams that would be the best fit for fantasy and stuff like that. But the 3 other in the top 5 would be Garrett Nussmeier, Carson Beck, and Drew Aller. Some people have them in different orders. I know some people like the experience of Carson Beck. Some people like what they saw in 2024 out of Nussmeier. Drew Aller is the toolsy guy that everybody can't quit.
And I don't know why.
I've seen him in Penn State. I get it. I still think I would if I could get him in the 5th or 6th round as a developmental guy for a team Green Bay. Maybe that's just because I saw them do with Malik Willis. A team like the Rams, right, that they have a veteran in place. Heck, even the Chiefs, put him behind Patrick Mahomes and just let him learn and get those tools to fully develop. Almost take a true another redshirt year. He's obviously come back from the ankle injury. I think he's like one of those guys that if a couple years down the line, like he ends up being a Kirk Cousins fourth round draft pick that starts for a while, I wouldn't be surprised as the tools, but we've seen a lot of tools these guys, fizzle out pretty quickly.
I almost think the injury for him, and then I don't know if he tried to come back. I know there was rumors of him debating coming back for another year at Penn State, trying to get the injury waiver. Um, and then him falling down draft boards after not playing much last season, I think has kind of not only helped him but helped GMs because coming into the season, there was like talks of Drew Aller potentially being the best quarterback in the class, at least going to be a first rounder, and I personally never saw it. And I was just sitting there like, which GM's going to get fired because they believed in Drew Aller. But if you're going to talk about him being a 4th to 7th round pick, being a good developmental guy, seeing if they can finally have somebody on lock what Penn State hasn't been able to in him, I could definitely see that being a good position to put him in and put a team in who maybe has an aging starting quarterback. Like, I don't know if the Rams take a shot on him if he hits their system, but like putting him behind Matt Stafford, putting him with Sean McVay might be one of the best positions to see if he really does have what he needs to succeed at the NFL level.
Yeah, and I think when we talk teams to watch, which one will have the best fantasy aspect? Like from the quarterback thing, I know we're 16 minutes in. We said we're going to talk about fantasy. There's not a guy on this list that I'm like, he is going to change fantasy football this year. I expect all the rookies to go undrafted. Fernando might not even start. Ty Simpson might not even start. And then the other three definitely should not be starting. Maybe they will at the end of the season. I mean, I can't even tell you who was starting for the Jets to end this season last year. And one of them is probably going to get to the Jets because they're one of the teams that need them the most. The Cardinals, they need a quarterback. But they have Jacoby Brissett as that stopgap guy. I mean, the Jets, I do believe, have Geno Smith as a stopgap guy. But after last year coming back to New York, they need someone. The Browns, obviously, they have a ton of draft capital, but they have an already interesting quarterback room with 2 draft picks last year, Deshaun Watson. Like, I think the Browns, although on paper they're like, yeah, that team needs a quarterback, I think they're a team that they're looking ahead to 2027 for a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Saints. I mean, Tyler Shuck looked pretty good last year. That's another team to watch out. But it seemed like he got all the, potential out there as a guy. So there's not a lot of starting opportunities, so to speak, and there's also not a lot of starting caliber guys that are going to make a fantasy impact.
Yeah, to me it feels like Raiders who have their guy locked up. Cardinals might get somebody to see if they can develop, and then Jets. And other than that, yeah, there was a lot of chess playing this year with, the quarterbacks that got cut and they took cap hits, and even the Dolphins after making the cut, signing Willis, like that filled that spot. It's an interesting. You can tell by how this quarterback class is, like how this class is viewed by how teams attack the quarterback market before the draft this year.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes this a more exciting draft from the standpoint of like seeing which teams are looking ahead for either trying to get a quarterback next year when the class seems to be a lot better, or who try to get the guy when they're not in position. They know they're not going to be in position next year, and they also don't want to, have to give a bunch of picks. And they have a place. Like the Rams seem like they're going to draft a quarterback. They need someone behind Matt Stafford.
Mm-hmm.
I think Green Bay, they lost Malik Willis as their backup. No threat of beating out Jordan Love. They're going to draft one. Could the 49ers get involved as like one of these, day 3 flyer quarterbacks, knowing that they're probably going to lose Mac Jones next year? Brock Purdy has an injury history. Do they want to get a guy in on their system? The Eagles, there's a lot of buzz about the Jalen Hurts thing. How does he feel about the new offense? Do they get a guy in that if they have an okay season, but they want to move on from Jalen Hurts, is there a guy in this class that, might fit the new system better? I don't know if there is, but that'd be a name to watch. And then I think the Cowboys, what are they, as Dak Prescott gets older, could they be a guy that's in a market for somebody later in the draft that they can then turn into a potential future starter, similar to how Dak Prescott was, I believe, a 4th round pick. Obviously, injuries accelerated his spot, but he did also, he was behind Tony Romo at the moment he was drafted.
Yeah, no, this is probably going to be the year of teams taking guys to try to get ahead more than being the year that, if you're desperate to take a quarterback now, you're going to get your guy. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what teams take them. Definitely not in round one, but future rounds, just to see, who is trying to set that up for the future and take that developmental quarterback. But I think the positions that are going to directly affect fantasy more this year. Apparently, I can't talk today. Cool. We're going to be running backs and wide receivers. So why don't we start with running backs, Cody? And who is your top guy in the running back market?
I mean, the top guy on the running back market, top guy for me, top guy for you, top guy for everyone
Yep.
is Jeremiah Love out of Notre Dame. This has been a guy that's been talked about. He's a definite top 10 pick, potentially even top 5. We'll see where I put him next week. A do-it-all. He's a runner. He's a pass catcher. He's a track star. If I wanted to keep going down that corny joke, I'm so sorry. But yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about him. He's going to be the 101 in your dynasty rookie drafts. Depending on where he goes, he might be, a first round pick, a low end first round, high end second round pick in general, kind of like we saw for Ashton Genty last year, depending on where I'll keep saying, depending on where he goes. I think that he's going to get a lot of buzz no matter where he goes, but I think some situations are definitely better than others.
Definitely. I do feel like there's a chance that he comes out and disappoints if he goes to the wrong fit, similar to the Ashton Genty from this past year. But in the long term, it's going to be the number one running back from the class. So it's like don't freak out if he goes to a bad team. I would just, stick the course, because when it comes to track record and, just skill level, I think he's, far above all the other backs in this class.
I mean, he is on the consensus board. He's currently like the 4th overall player. So
running backs are never that high. The last time I personally remember a running back that high was Saquon Barkley.
Yeah,
Saquon Barkley one since, but
yeah, I mean, Saquon Barkley, he went number 2 overall. Leonard Fournette went 4. I mean, Zeke went 4. We'll go back even further. Like, there has been running backs to go 4, although Tyler's not here. I will give you an oddball fact that I did hear on one of the draft podcasts. The last time a running back, I believe they said top 10. I might not have it might have been the full first round, but let's just say top 10 to make it even, closer. Running back, first round pick, top 10 that won a Super Bowl with this team was Reggie Bush.
Ooh.
So I think that's where you still get into the debate of, like, for fantasy, it's going to be great. Like, you see Jeremiah Love, a team go all in, but like Bijan Robinson's been great for fantasy. He hasn't been great for helping the Falcons get over the hump, right? Yeah. Like, Saquon didn't, I mean, he was really good. He didn't help the Giants. He helped the Eagles once they got moved on from there. Jahmyr Gibbs is a, one that's, looking kind of close, but there was David Montgomery there, and he was technically picked 12, and we're staying in the top 10. And they didn't win a Super Bowl. That's very hard to do. So I think that's going to be the interesting conversation. His floor is getting lower and lower. Like, some people might have said top 10. Maybe he falls all the way to 10. Not seems it's 7. And as we get into the next week, it could be 6, 5, 4.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz that he's going to be going in the top 5, so I'm interested to see how high he goes. So, and I like what you said there about, teams who draft running backs in the top 10 and they win a Super Bowl with them. So if you are a team picking in the top, a fan of a team picking in the top 10, top 7, whatever, you should be hoping you don't take Jeremiah Love. But if you are a fantasy owner, you're sitting here licking your chops like, hope I have 101 in Dynasty like I do here, because more than likely going to be a big hit.
Yeah, so for like the people listening at home, you're like, what is Dynasty? Dynasty is where you play with the same players. You have rookie draft picks. Some leagues are more intense. Ours has salary caps and all that. Some people are just like expanded keepers. So there's the whole range here. And as someone who 2 years ago had picks 1 and 2 and was able to get Marvin Harrison Jr., which at the time was the home run pick, kind of like Jeremiah Love was, I only bring that up because 2 years ago, we're talking fantasy football, and I'm not projecting anything on Jeremiah Love, is sometimes the guy that you think is going to be 101 overall home run might not pan out. So just because you don't have 101, you might have 102, 103, heck, 105. 107. Like they're still going to be good players, even though we're saying it's a weak class.
Exactly. So, what other running back names do you like? I mean, we can kind of quickly hit through them, just give a little bit of like a quick outline, because I do think these guys are going to be a lot more dependent on the teams that are going to need a running back. But what are just some names to listen to?
Yeah. So for me, I think there is a chance that Jeremiah Love's teammate Jadarian Price finds his way into the first round as the second running back. Uh, Mike Washington Jr., a guy out of Arkansas, big, fast. He's gonna wake his way in the second round, maybe early third at the latest. And those are kind of like your big three with like a gap between 1 and 2 and a gap between 2 and 3. And then the rest, you're kind of looking at your day 3 guys. I mean, some of them might sneak up into the round 3 just because of the nature of the position, whether that's a Jonah Coleman out of Washington and Emma Johnson out of Nebraska. If the list can go on, the 2 running backs out of Penn State. I like Nick Singleton. I think he could be a fun, 5-6 round guy. I'd also throw in there Kalen Black from Indiana. We saw him go on a run. He's a little bit later down in that 5, 6, 7 lane as well. But to your point, fits are going to matter. Opportunities are going to matter. And it is the position that, you get the guys at the top, but then you also see your 5th, 6th round picks, break out later in the season and become starter guys that, help win redraft fantasy leagues or steals of your dynasty leagues.
Definitely. So, talking about the teams that could end up making those picks, we kind of talked about who is in the market early for Jeremiah Love. I mean, we're looking at pick 3 Arizona, pick 4 Tennessee, pick 5 the Giants because they seem to want to find a more pure or whatever runner to go with Scadaboo or to move on from Scadaboo. I would assume the Browns would not take one at 6, but Washington at 7 is intriguing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule out the Browns just because the player like Jeremiah Love is. I think he is going to get to a point where the value of the caliber of player meets positional value versus needs, right? Like if he falls all the way to 10, which is the Cincinnati Bengals.
The Bengals, yes.
They have no reason to take Jeremiah Love at 10 with how bad their defense is. They have Chase Brown, but they might be forced to because of the talent of player you're going to get. That's why I still think even like 10, 12 is probably the super max floor with Dallas.
Yeah, even though they re-signed Javonte, you have to argue they could make a step up.
But I think it's more likely that he goes inside the top 5 than it is he falls out of the top 10. So I don't like 10 for me is kind of like the hard floor. I think if there is any way, shape, or form, I might even do this in our mock draft next week just because I would like to see it happen. Jeremiah Love to the Commanders, I think would be a beautiful mix. I think he would instantly, that's a position, a spot that goes, oh, he's in contention for first round redraft leagues, not just Dynasty 101. Like, because that is a good fit. There's a lot of buzz about Tennessee right now wanting him. They have Tony Pollard, so you're going to get in the redraft situation. How does that break down, and does he maximize their team? The same with the Giants at pick 5. Could they go with him? And then what does that do for? Why did I just blank on? Why am I blanking on his name? Who's the running back? Number 44. Broke his ankle.
Scadaboo, yeah.
Thank you. I could not think of Scadaboo to save my life. The Giants, like that's another pairing. We're going to have to see how that one splits. Maybe he goes the round 3 or 4 in your redraft leagues. The Cardinals, the same thing. They have James Conner, so it might not be this year that he pops off, but the year after that, do
Conner
they still
coming
like
off a major injury though? We don't know what we're going to get anymore. Yep.
I mean, I think the Cardinals are. I don't think he'll go as high as 3. I think floor 4 to 12 is the range for Jeremiah Love. That's kind of where unless all the buzz for Tennessee is true, and somebody like the Giants do a swap with Arizona just because that's their guy too, right? Or maybe the Commanders go from 7 to 3 to jump. I could see something along those lines. That's kind of where I'm feeling like for Jeremiah Love. But then any team could use it. Like any team outside of like, heck, even the Lions, right? Like if the Lions get an Emmett Johnson, right, in the 3rd round, or let's go Kyle Singleton in the 5th round, right? A guy people might know of we might know him more because of location and proximity. He might end up being a good back because they don't have David Montgomery anymore. Obviously, Jameer Gibbs is going to be the number one guy, but he might be a guy that is worth owning in later rounds. So
Yeah.
a lot of teams can use running backs. It's just going to be hard to. There's some teams like the Commanders. I think they're looking for a day one starter. The Titans are probably looking for a guy that's going to replace Tony Pollard after this year, maybe halfway through the season. And then Seattle, the Super Bowl champs. Yes, they have Zach Charbonnet, who's going to eat into some of that, but he was injured. They lost Ken Walker. I think Jadarian Price is very similar to like a really good runner, needs to work on his blocking, needs to work on his pass catching. That sounds a lot like that's why I said he might find his way into round one at pick 32 to Seattle to replace what they lost in Ken Walker.
I like that fit a lot, and I think you did a good job of hitting a lot of the names. And the interesting way I've been looking at this when I'm thinking about, like, do you want to take a running back so early, if we're talking about, with Love going in those first 12 picks, there's a lot of similarities between the Titans, the Giants, the Commanders, that, like, they are all in the wide receiver conversation too, and it's more or less just trying to find skilled position players to go around a young quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And if that best skill position player in this draft or that's available at that time ends up just being a running back instead of a wide receiver, that's what would help their team the most, and that's why it makes sense to take him.
Yeah,
They're
and
all going to be in the wide receiver conversation when we get to that position.
Yeah, and I think too, especially with those late round guys, similar to like we talked about the quarterbacks. Like, I'm going to relate this back to the Packers because that's what I know best. That even Josh Jacobs, right? Like he is the guy. But if they took Mike Washington with their first pick in pick 52, it would not catch me off guard because that means that they're going to move. They're going to do the Packers thing. They're going to move on from Jacobs last year, and so for year one, you probably don't want him unless Jacobs gets hurt. But then he's going to be the bell cow, and I think you can kind of see some of that take place with, maybe not the Bills because they just re-signed James Cook, right? But like we're talking, the Buccaneers, they could use a running back as well, but that's probably not one of their biggest needs. The Vikings, they have Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, but they could definitely use a running back and that could break in into the starting lineup. The list goes on and on. So the running backs are always a fun name to watch, especially for Dynasty, because you get those players in those later rounds. That's like your guy. Look at Chase Brown, was a later round pick, finally got his opportunity, turned out to be really good.
So, little Dynasty just talk here, and I know it depends a lot on fit position, but say your second half of the first round, you're a decent team, you come up on a situation where you're coming up, you see a running back there who you know has a lot of potential, but is behind, say, a Josh Jacobs, and you're going to have to wait a year on him, but then after that, he's more than likely the starter. How early would you take a guy like that, or do you try to push him around too, or let somebody else take that risk?
I think if you're talking Dynasty, it depends on how many players in your league and the setup. Like, because if you're picking in the bottom half, you probably made the playoffs, which means you're probably going to be a good team next year. You're not going to be up in the, hopefully not going to be up in the upper echelon of, high end draft picks. I think I'm okay taking, a high upside flyer. So let's say Mike Washington, right? Like I'm okay taking him, in the first, 6 to 10 picks in the first round after some of these other names go off the board, right? And I think it also depends on like how does your league evaluate quarterbacks. Some of the dynasty mock drafts, they're like Fernando Mendoza, he's the top 3 pick. I know on our dynasty league, it has changed, but for a long time, quarterbacks didn't get drafted in the first round, which would change the spectrum or change the scale because we're full IDP. Sometimes defensive players would go, and the scoring plays it into a little bit. But your guys like Mike Washington, I know we're going to talk about wide receivers here in a little bit. I think we should actually go to tight ends next because I think they're not that exciting. I'd say wide receivers for last because I think it's the most interesting, but I'm also a wide receiver dude.
No, I'm cool with going to tight ends next. I mean, I agree. There's kind of like 2 names that stand out, and they're not the most exciting. And then when it comes to like teams that could fit, you could kind of almost fit a good tight end in anywhere. And tight ends just being are strange in the fact of like blocking tight ends versus perceiving tight ends, etc.
Yeah. So I would push back a little bit. I really like Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon, the tight end. He is more of a move tight end weapon guy. I think both kind of guys are. Eli Stowers from Vanderbilt too. They're both your definite pass catchers. Stowers, I saw some comps to like Isaiah Likely because he was getting mocked in the rounds round two to the Ravens in a mock draft I was looking at. I was like, that makes a ton of sense to me. He's just a very young former quarterback. No, shout out Logan Thomas, former number 99 overall NCAA player turned tight end in the NFL. So soft spot for him there. But I want to go back to Kenyon Sadiq. Just a weapon. He doesn't have the high upside that got Kyle Pitts drafted number 4 overall, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But I see why they can, a guy that could just come in, make plays, probably not even as good as like we saw last year in Tyler Warren or Brock Bowers the year before, but somewhere similar to that. Like can do a little bit of everything, a lot of fun. Probably falls in the second half of the draft. Although I know Mel Kiper did it in a couple mock drafts ago, and I think it would be a ton of fun. Although I highly doubt they would do that. Uh, Kenyon Sadiq going to Kansas City, even if it meant going at pick 9, I think would be a fun fit. Just getting a new explosive tight end into that offense, into that mastermind, learning behind a guy like Travis Kelsey, playing with Patrick Mahomes for the next 10 years. Like that could be a lot of fun. But to your point, I think tight end is a very specific, like, what do you need kind of player. Like I'll use the Buccaneers, for example. Kate Otten, very good, solid number 2 option. Probably a better blocker than a pass catcher, maybe a little bit of a red zone threat blocking kind of guy. They could use a guy like a Sadiq or maybe even a Stowers in round 2, a little bit more of explosive pass catcher option. We flip that over to the Baltimore Ravens. They still have Mark Andrews. Yes, he's getting older, but he is the guy. He's the pass catcher. They might like a guy like Oscar Delp from Georgia or Max Clare from Ohio State, who good hands for some of them, but might be a little bit more of that solid number 2 blocking kind of guy. So kind of what you're looking at.
Yeah. So when it comes to team fits, like I'm just gonna look at Sadiq first off because I think a lot of mocks I've seen tend to lean him towards going in the 20s. And you can tell me if you're wrong, if like more recent drafts have him moving up. But there's some interesting teams in the 20s that could be looking at him. The Steelers, first off, I know they have a lot of tight ends, but like they just need playmakers, similar to some of those teams in the top 5 or top 10 I've been talking about. Um, and he might be a fit there. I know he's been linked to the Chargers at this spot a little bit, but I don't know if that makes the most sense because I think Gadsden makes sense. The Eagles, before they re-signed Dallas Goedert, I know that was one of the favorite spots for him. I don't know if it makes sense now that Goddard is back there. But like further down, the Texans, they're not super exciting at tight end. They have Dalton Schultz, but if they could take a step up there, maybe it's a good compliment for what they have going on. And then the Chiefs coming up there again at pick 29. If you don't take him that super early pick 9 spot, and he does fall all the way down to pick 29 for some reason, it feels like a no-brainer to have him sit behind Kelsey down there.
Yeah, I just think you're going in the wrong direction. I think you know, potentially 20 with I know they have Jake Ferguson, but you got Dallas if they want a playmaker on offense, but they have some playmakers. So I think Carolina makes a ton of sense. Getting Bryce Young, another weapon, someone in the middle. They've spent a lot on the outside. Not all of it has hit, but I think he would make sense. Then the 2 NFC North teams at 17 and 18, whether that is replacing Sam Laporta, because they're probably not going to re-sign him, it sounded like, or an aging TJ Hawkinson.
Who sounds like he might be on the move at some point too.
Right. So and then the Buccaneer, I think Sadiq goes, 14, 15, 16, 17. Those teams need some other positions, but there is that kind of he is such a fun player. Where might he go? Could he be a guy to follow in the Mark Andrews footsteps at 14? That kind of seems kind of high for me, but I really like the 17, 18, 19 range, with 19 being the Carolina Panthers is currently where I'm like, that one feels like the most sense, where the other two, there's a couple other players, don't want to give the mock draft away, I think might let him slide, but 19 is kind of where I'm at.
With how the Ravens have traditionally filled their offense, it feels like it makes sense to have him go 14 to the Ravens, but I have to also like remind myself that Harbaugh's gone, new regime there. There might be some adjustments. I do think they could use another offensive weapon. I don't necessarily think it should be a tight end at 14 though.
Yeah. But I don't know if we talked teams. I mean, we talked a little bit about like those draft picks in the first round. But I do think, the Broncos, they're another team. They were interested in making a move at tight end last year. I read the trade deadline. I think they don't have a first round pick. Tight ends normally take a little bit while to see, but maybe you'll see some action there. Cincinnati, I mean, they brought back Mike Gesicki, but they're still trying to figure that one out. And then I like what you mentioned earlier about the Texans.
Yeah, I think that covers tight ends for me. If you want to move on to your favorite position here, and it gives you almost a whole 20 minutes to talk about wide receivers.
I don't know if that's enough.
I didn't think it was, but we did a pretty good job of trying here.
Yeah, so I think there is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wide receivers that are going to go in the first round, and I could talk myself into 8. I don't think we're going to get all the way to 8, but there is 6 that I think we're definitely going to get in the first round. And I'll just read no specifically, not my order. This is just the order of the list I'm looking at. Carnell Tate, wide receiver, Ohio State. Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver for USC. Jordan Tyson, wide receiver for Arizona State. Omar Cooper Jr., wide receiver from Indiana. Kevin Concepcion, wide receiver from the Browns. Denzel Boston, wide receiver for the Washington Huskies. So those are kind of some of the guys that I'm looking at. And then I think there's some day 2 options I really like as well. And that's what I wanted to bring up. I mentioned 6 or 8, and I said that number for a reason, because I think there might only be 3 that are worth first round pick, but because of the rising cost of a wide receiver, some teams might, need them, looking at the Miami Dolphins, looking at the Cleveland Browns, but they're not going to move the needle for fantasy, right? Like that's not where we're looking at. Some of these guys, I think there's a big 3: Tyson, Lemon, Tate. Tyson is my number 1. I would pound the table for him. I would take him in the top 10. I think Carnell Tate goes before him. There's a chance Mekhi Lemon goes before him. But Tyson is my guy. I know there's some injury concerns, but it was a collarbone, an ACL, and I think a broken ankle. I forget what the third one is, it was a hamstring. That was the soft tissue one.
Yeah, that's the only concerning one long term, usually, as long as you've seen him come back from the knee injury.
Yeah, and well, his knee injury is recent, so
yeah,
that is one of. But I would take him. I would still take him as the top wide receiver in this class.
But probably won't because of that reason. So that's actually worth noting if he falls to a team that's a little bit more of a contender.
Yeah, I mean, he has been getting some more late round buzz. He was the top guy. It kind of reminds me of last year. We did this with Tedoroto McMillan.
Yes.
I don't know. He was the top guy coming in, but now there's your Matthew Goldens, your Emeka Abukas, your Luther Burdens, the Trey Harris. The list goes on and on and on. Well, it ended up still just being Ted McMillan, and that was probably the right pick. And I think you could get some of that with Jordan Tyson, although I do think Carnell Tate, he is on the big board still higher. He is a guy that if Jeremiah Love goes early, I could see him going to a team like the Commanders. Although I'm still on the Ayuk is going to go there, so they might be willing to pass on a quarterback at the top 7. But I don't think they're also going to be willing to put all their eggs in a basket for Brandon Ayuk and a year older Scary Terry. So would not be surprised if they go with a wide receiver in that spot.
Still wild to me that Terry's in his 30s, but I think they're definitely a team that I'm watching out for there. But the teams that are going to really interest me for fantasy is if you see one of the big 3 fall down to, outside of the top 15, and you see a big name receiver go to, I don't know, Minnesota probably wouldn't. They still have Addison there. Maybe Carolina getting a second option would be interesting. Dallas, if they decide to move on from George Pickens. I know currently he's under the franchise tag, and they haven't seemed to make any progress on a long-term deal. And then down into the 20s, there's some teams down there that are contenders that could potentially or definitely do need wide receiver help, that if one of those top three happens to fall that low for some reason, that would be big. But there's still some other guys that might get taken in the first round that could end up bumping up, dynasty or fantasy boards just because they get to a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Tyson is the one with the most, you know, or the widest current range in where he's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen him go as early as 7 to the Commanders in some mock drafts, recently as late as 23 to the Eagles. So, like, all over the place. Again, I think he goes a lot higher. The team that I have circled on my list for wide receiver is pick 13, Los Angeles Rams. And I only bring that up because Devontae Adams was a part of the trade rumors. Obviously, that was for A.J. Brown. Sounds like that trade is not going to happen, and Devontae is going to be there, but he's getting a year older. We haven't talked much about it. We're not going to dive much into it, but there is a Puka Nacua situation going on as he is trying to get his mental health right. They are in the all-in mode with Matt Stafford. Do they go get another weapon just to have it? I think Jordan Tyson there would be a home run fit pick, and I would like that a lot. And then the other team
could be a messy one for short term. If we find out Puka's not in any kind of situation, plays a full year, they still have Adams in house, but you have to think that Adams trade rumors are going to ramp back up if they do just go ahead and make that move.
Yeah, and for clarity, from my understanding, the trade was for A.J. Brown. This wasn't we're shopping Devontae. It was we threw his name out there as a potential for an A.J. Brown trade, getting a little younger, getting a different kind of player. So I don't think like they're actively shopping him in any way, shape, or form. And I do expect him and Nacua to play this season. Nacua does have his own injury question marks on his own, but I expect him to play. Obviously, you have the teams like the Commanders, the Saints, the Dolphins in that top 11, and the Browns at 6 that need wide receiver help desperately. So I think they're all in play there. And then I am going to look at Kansas City again. Like, I know cornerback is a big need for them after losing Watson and McDuffie, ironically, both to the Rams. But another, like, and this is just me loving Jordan Tyson, and I completely get that. I've talked about this before, and building a basketball team is how I look at building a wide receiver room. Jordan Tyson on the outside, Xavier Worthy on the outside, Rashee Rice as your slot. Rice can play on the outside.
Yeah.
He plays all over the place, but as you're like starting 3, like I think they all complement each other really well, and I think that would be a lot of fun. I just don't know if the Chiefs can go wide receiver when they have some questions on defense.
Yeah. I mean, they have a lot of questions in the wide receiver room too, which is, what's the availability of Rice going to be again? Because we still keep hearing more things. And Xavier Worthy not only hasn't really jumped up and, become that guy, he's also got injury concerns. So they haven't really been able to move the needle past where they've been. They lost Hollywood Brown this offseason too. Not that he was really a big difference maker, but he was obviously a guy who was filling in a gap. So I almost feel like even if they take a wide receiver in the second round and don't, go as far as putting that draft capital on 9, or I guess if they take a wide receiver with their second pick at 29, they're going to be somebody who's under the spotlight. It's just going to be hard for redrafts to see, like, you want to wait and see what happened with the availability of Rice's and such. But in Dynasty, you have to think that people are going to be looking at him as maybe a mid-ish first-round pick if there's someone taking that early.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, just speaking Dynasty, I'll reevaluate after the draft, but pre-draft right now, my top 5 picks would probably be, my order would be Love 1, Tyson 2, Tate 3, Lemon 4, then 5, 6, Sadiq or Price, whichever one you like there. That's kind of my top 6 list. And I think some order of that, if you want to throw Mendoza in there, those are your top 7 picks in Dynasty leagues, how they shape, how they form. I do think there is potential, like you mentioned, for some players to jump in that weren't even on our list as high, end up being in that higher value, whether it's an Omar Cooper Jr., whether it is if we want to go to the second round players, a Chris Brazel from Tennessee, big, fast kind of guy. Uh, Jer- Jeremy, he spells with a G though, so it always throws me off when I see his name. Bernard, not Gio Bernard because I always get that name pop in my head when I hear his name. Throwback to the old Cincinnati Bengal running back. Really solid player, a solid number two will come in, give you 700 yards. Maybe not as a rookie, but like that's kind of like 700 yards, 5 touchdowns, 50 catches. Like that's probably his career ceiling, but like that's a solid player, right? And he might maybe he exceeds that. And then you have your flyers later from your smaller schools, like end of round 2, round 3, that I would keep an eye on. And this might be your second round picks in Dynasty, or maybe they find the right spot. Whether that's a Ted Hurst from Georgia State, a Bryce Lance from North Dakota State. I think those are some. Dejon Striblin, he's been getting a little bit of like mid-round buzz, and as someone that is very focused on the second round pick, he's a name I've heard. Or second round, I've heard his name a lot as the second, third kind of round player too. So a lot of fun wide receivers.
There is, but why don't we take a couple minutes to talk teams? And if you want to try to fit some people into teams, you can. If you don't, that's fine. But a couple of teams that I put down here that I thought would be interesting places for wide receivers. The Saints, if they decide to take somebody to complement with Chris Olave. The Browns obviously would be tough with their quarterback situation, but they are wide receiver needy. Jets in a similar situation with that, but somebody to go with Garrett Wilson. The Commanders, Cody's still obviously convinced that they're going to put Brandon Ayuk, but drafting a wide receiver definitely on the table. The Patriots are on the trade market for wide receivers, but they could just decide to go to the draft. And then some teams that can make a very interesting wide receiver landing spot that aren't necessarily wide receiver needy now. We don't know the situation with the Chiefs. That's why I brought them up earlier. The Packers lost a couple of guys between free agency and trades, so I'm going to keep an eye on them to see if they're going anywhere. And then if the Eagles draft a wide receiver early, I think that basically spells the end of the A.J. Brown era, but we got to see when the trade's going to happen and to where.
A.J. Brown's not getting traded before June 1st.
They take a wide receiver in round 1, it's basically saying we're definitely trading him post June 1st.
Correct. But they physically can't, on the salary cap, trade him before June 1st. So he's not getting traded this weekend unless they also trade another player to open up more salary cap. Like, it has to be a domino effect. And I said this weekend, I mean next weekend, as much as I want the draft to get here as well. I mean, like I said, every team will probably end up taking a wide receiver at one point. It's just the nature of it. You mentioned the Saints and Chris Olave. Why I think they're kind of out on, the first, guy in the top 10 is unless they're going to, maybe a Carnell Tate could come in and pair nicely with a Chris Olave. I think Mekhi Lemon and him are very similar, like play styles. Like, Lemon is definitely more of a slot guy than Olave is, but they're both on the smaller side, so to speak.
Yeah. You'd want a bigger receiver. Gotcha.
Correct. I think Omar Cooper Jr., he's a fascinating playmaker as well. That he could be a lot of fun for a team like the Steelers, right? Maybe they draft a wide receiver. I think he would pair nicely with a guy like DK Metcalf. I think he would complement him well. Obviously, you mentioned the Patriots. They could use another name, although they did just bring in Romeo Doubs. But those teams, that's why I think the wide receiver position, as much as any other position, is going to impact the draft in the biggest way. Like because of picks 7 through 25, even, I could just say the whole first round. Like the draft is built on runs, right? Like we might see a wide receiver run, then we're probably going to see an offensive lineman run, and then near the end we'll probably see a defensive tackle run, and then it's just like where does the run start and how long does it go? That's why I think there's a chance that heck, we could get Chris Bell at the end of the first round, wide receiver out of Louisville. I definitely think he's more likely, if you had Dousman Day, to go in the second round of the draft. But even like a Denzel Boston, could he fall into the end of the first round just because so many wide receivers are gone? Or do teams like the Saints, the Commanders, the Chiefs, not because of the Chiefs themselves, like, do they go, we're going to get one of these defensive players or offensive linemen or cornerbacks early. And because we have a high second round pick, is that the bread and butter spot to draft a wide receiver? And I think those are the players you have to. I always think second round wide receivers are the most fascinating for fantasy. Obviously, when you get a guy like Jamar Chase in the top 5, right? Heck, even Justin Jefferson down at 22, I believe it was, since the Eagles didn't take him at 21, they took Jalen Rager.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It irritates me just as much as it irritates you because I have to now see him, and he was a guy that I really liked. But like those second round wide receivers tend to like make impacts at a high, I'm not going to say a higher rate in year one because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but to me it feels like that because they go to teams that are established versus like I'd rather probably in a redraft league take a Chris Bell or a Denzel Boston who go high first, second round or high second round, or even a Jeremy Bernard going middle of the second round versus, if Malachi Lemon goes to the Dolphins, as much as I like Malik Willis, right? Like they have so many issues. That's kind of where I'm at. But I think the Dolphins are definitely in play for a wide receiver. But remember, they did hire basically everyone from Green Bay who took their first wide receiver in 20 years of drafting last year. They might not be on board to do it 2 years in a row.
It's very true there too. First off, I've never heard someone say Louisville before.
Did I say Louisville?
You did.
Nice.
So I wanted to bring that up, but no, a lot of. I like your point about the receiver going later in, being a better fit in redraft. Because the other nice thing is when you're talking about redraft, those guys that are like the top end receivers usually start going, I'm trying to remember last year, somewhere between round like 6 or 7 to round 10. Yeah, you're welcome. But then you're going to have the time after that. You get towards rounds 12, 13, 14. You have late round flyers. You'll be able to get those guys at basically no value. If they don't work out, you drop them. It's fine. But they have a chance to make a bigger impact because they're on a more well-established team. So when you're talking guys to watch for redraft, you're looking at some of those second-round wide receivers as your late-round flyer possibilities if they go to a team that has a good quarterback or a good offensive scheme, and they have targets to be given.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to pull it up real quick. I'll talk through it as it loads, but I am looking for I'm looking at Dane Brugler. If you don't know who that is, he is obviously a draft guy. He writes for The Athletic. He does a ton of work. He puts out a draft guide called The Beast each year. Definitely recommend checking that. But he also does a full 7-round every pick mock draft. And he's a guy that's also in the know, kind of like a Peter Schrager for, a guy that always seems to know a couple picks right there. So I'm trying to pull it up too and just look at his mock draft because he did all 7 rounds. I know there is some people, wide receivers that we're talking about for potential in the second round. Why is it not loaded? There we go. Whew. As some, fits that might be bigger fantasy impacts in year one, which is what we were talking about. Here we go. So obviously he had Chris Bell going to the Dolphins, not taking one in the first round. Had Malachi Fields. We didn't even talk about him. He went to the Eagles. High, second round player, could come in could be the sign of the end of AJ Brown. Jermaine Bernard to the 49ers, another one like to replace
I like that one actually a lot.
Replace the Juwan Jennings role kind of situation there. Dejon Stribling to the Patriots. I'll go Zachariah Branch to the Cardinals at the top of the 3rd round. That one does make, probably is not as much love here, but like Ted Hurst was a guy I talked about. Maybe not like, a guy to keep a name on because of where the Commanders went in the other picks as well. So I don't need to go through this whole draft. Get your Athletic subscription and check it out. Like he does some good work over there.
So just to reiterate what you put home there, if you told me that Malachi Lemon got taken pretty high and he went to the Dolphins at 11, hypothetically, don't know if that would ever actually happen. Or you can go out there and get a receiver that was taken late in the second round by San Francisco, a team that is trading away Ayuk, didn't re-sign Juwan Jennings, and is looking for a 1B to a 1A. I think that I would rather take that in a redraft. Don't hear me out like in Dynasty or multi-years, I'm probably taking the guy that has the higher upside and hoping the Dolphins turn around. But in a redraft, I would rather wait 2 or 3 more rounds, take the guy who's going to the better offense. So I like that you pointed that out, and I think that's something I'm going to be looking at as we get into day 2 of the draft.
Yeah. Like, let's just say Carnell Tate goes number 6 to the Browns. In Dynasty, you're still going to take him in the top 5. But if you ask me in redraft, would I rather have him or a Jermaine, or I don't know, like, because of the Jeremy, I'm so sorry. Jeremy Bernard to the 49ers in round 2. Like, I might like that option better. So I think that's a great point to end on as we wrap up this episode.
All right. Cody, thank you for all the great insight. I'm looking forward to talking through your mock draft next week on Wednesday.
I'm nervous. I really am nervous on the mock draft.
I mean,
all right, here, you answer this question. The way you have
to look at it is nobody does that well on mock drafts.
No, it's like the March Madness bracket.
Yeah.
You get 3 right, you feel good about yourself.
Exactly. There was a year that we did a mock draft, all 3 of us back when it was early in the show, and we put it on the old, not existent anymore, like Guess the Pick on NFL.com. And I remember being absolutely thrilled that I got through 7 picks and I had 5 correct and 2 one spot off.
Yeah.
Like, that's unheard of.
Right. So, like, it's definitely an interesting thing. But here, I'm going to let you decide this, and for the listeners that made it this through, do you want trades in the mock draft or do you want straight?
We are a fun podcast that I think put in some hypothetical trades. Just get us talking.
Okay. Cool. We'll have trades. That's what I wanted to know, how you wanted to start. I think we've done trades in the past, so we'll continue that one as I try to find the outro music here. It should be playing in your ears. If you've made it this far, let us know in the comments on the show. Shoot us a DM on social media at the Couch GMs. Who are some of your favorite prospects? Join the conversation next Wednesday and go along with the draft pick. Tell us the ones that got right, the ones you got wrong, maybe your favorite team, who you want them to take, and we'll take that all into account. As always, thanks for checking out the Couch GMs podcast. We are live traditionally Thursdays during the offseason, but Wednesday next week. I'm Cody Rookcap. That's George Kirk, and we'll talk to you all in 6 days.